Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this press briefing on the penultimate day of the World Conference here in Johannesburg. Welcome once more to the WADA President, John Fahey, and the Director General, David Howman. This morning, we heard the final interventions delivered from both the sport movement and public authorities, while this afternoon was dedicated to the reviewing of 4 of the international standards. There'll be an opportunity for media questions immediately, so can we please take the first question from the floor? Yes, please.
My understanding, sir, is that you had an afternoon of deliberations on the various subsections. Can you give us a little wrap-up of any substantive stuff that might have come out of that?
I can't. The Director General may. I haven't had a report back from the 4 standards. There were 2 meetings going on, contemporaneously during the course of the afternoon, and I haven't had a briefing on some outcomes. But David, you can help there?
Look, I think the best way I can describe it is that each one of the sessions was attended by many people with interesting interventions, but there was only one standard that needs a little bit of work done to it as a result of those interventions, and that's the International Standard for Laboratories, and there will be a suggested amendment made to that, which the Executive Committee will look at in the morning. The other standards, there were significant voices of support for both the process and the content, and considerable discussion on how we will go forward, therefore, with the practice of those standards.
Next question, please. Yes, Gerald, please.
I guess you're probably tired of hearing this name, but I'll go for it again. Mr. Armstrong, and possible thoughts looking ahead. Is it part of the thinking that a revised section of the code would include giving leniency to previous offenders in doping cases?
No, what is concluded is concluded. The code will take effect effectively from the first, the date is the 1st of January. The approval tomorrow does bring into play 1 or 2 minor legal issues that may bring some considerations forward at an earlier time, but not before tomorrow. So the past is the past. The concluded cases have concluded.
Ben.
Just following on from that, so we were led to believe that there may have been a discussion relating to the UCI Commission that riders who come forward to testify may be given the sort of the option of a 0 ban, which is in the new code, as opposed to the existing code, and a discussion is being had as to whether that is an achievable goal. Can you confirm that those discussions are taking place?
Well, look, I guess that was what I was alluding to without wishing to go into the legality of what can or can't occur. There's a principle at law called lex medior, which says that if there is an approved law that is not yet come into effect, that consideration can be given to what the meaning of that new law is from the time that it's approved by the appropriate tribunal or whoever the body might be, parliaments more regularly. In our case, of course, it's our foundation board. And you would note that in the revised code proposals that is going before the foundation board for approval tomorrow, there is a provision that will allow, on a case-by-case basis, and providing, of course, there is substantiation to give for consideration to be given to it on a case-by-case basis, it would allow for substantial assistance to carry no penalty whatsoever. Currently, you can get a 75% remission, and we often hear of it in the context of 2 years down to 6 months under the current code. There will be provision for that to be taken back to 0, but again, only with WADA's consent, and there would have to be a clear reason for that to occur, and it would be dealt with on a case-by-case basis. So what you've alluded to accurately is that as from tomorrow afternoon, current athletes, current cyclists, if that inquiry gets off and running in the manner we believe it will, could well have that before them as a consideration for giving support. But it will be dealt with on a case-by-case basis, and of course would only apply to current cyclists. It would not apply to cases decided in the past.
Yes, next question on the front row.
A question for Mr. Howman. Could you elaborate on the suggestions for the changes in the laboratory standards?
It's an issue that relates to the, it's a technical issue which relates to the storage of samples and the way in which they can be reanalyzed. So it required a, if you like, a tweaking to the section within the international standard to ensure that all options were appropriately covered in that respect.
Next question.
Now that you're basically about to go into your board meeting and wrap the whole thing up, could you reflect on these 3 days in terms of how you felt it turned out? Was it as smooth a rise as you had anticipated? Were there a lot of hiccups privately, behind the scenes along the way? Just a reflection on this process of just specifically the last 3 days.
You always want tomorrow's news today, don't you? I mean, we've still got a day to go, and I would have been happy tomorrow afternoon when it's all over, or tomorrow at lunchtime we've got a press conference at the conclusion of the conference to come and to reflect back on the 3 days. But look, if I could say, I haven't seen hiccups. I thought there's been an enormous amount of goodwill here. I think there's been a strong and clear message that comes through time and time again from the interventions, particularly from athletes themselves or former athletes, looking at what we can do better in the context of supporting clean athletes. I've found that there's been commitment right across the board, strong commitment from the ISC, reflected in the ISC President's speech yesterday, and I might add in discussions with me, reaffirmed, and I see governments right across the board from various parts of the world indicating again that we have to reinvigorate our efforts going forward. That to me is gives all the signs of a very successful conference, which I hope concludes that way.
Yes, next question from the gentleman here.
Yes. Following up from the last WADA conference in Madrid, it was observed that sometimes you find situations where people who are charged with enforcing the doping, particularly the security-related people, use some of these banned substances for recreational purposes. Has there been any movement in that area to curb the use of some of these banned substances, especially from agencies who are supposed to enforce the avoidance of doping?
Well, look, the banned substances is a product of the WADA Code, which allows or creates a list committee, a team of experts who analyse what should be on the prohibited list, and they determine what should be given to the Executive Committee to approve for that list. They review it annually. New substances come in. It relates to, of course, performance-enhancing drugs, some of which are used in other areas. I will never use the word recreational drugs. I don't believe there is such a thing. I believe that there are illegal drugs and there are performance-enhancing drugs. I think you're referring to the illegal drugs, and some of those, of course, are covered by the prohibited list. What we're doing here this week has got nothing to do with that. It's an annual event that decides that, and to the extent that we have in some way looked at some of those issues, I don't believe that the revision to the code will change anything that we're doing there. The commitment is for those on the prohibited list, and I'm not too sure what you're referring to in Madrid. I can't quite see that connection.
Next question, please.
Hi, Giuseppe, German TV. ARD, I have a question about the Sochi or the Moscow lab. Is it true that WADA is considering to suspend the Moscow lab, or maybe also that because in conclusio they are responsible for the Sochi lab, also the lab in Sochi?
The accreditation of WADA accredited laboratories is an ongoing annual thing relating to quality. Every year there is an assessment done as to the manner in which the laboratories are carrying out their responsibilities under the WADA code, and the standard for quality is extraordinarily high, as it should be. There is an absolute need to assure all the athletes of the world that they can compete with the utmost of confidence, because if there's a prohibited drug in their system, then effectively they are in some difficulties. It only then becomes a question of just what the sanction may or may not be, not a question of what is right or what's wrong. It's in your system, you've got to explain it, you've got to take the consequences as a result under the code. In that context, we do have very high standards, and we do evaluate in a proper manner every year. That often leads to matters coming to WADA for consideration about the operations of laboratories. There is a matter that is currently being considered. The outcome of that is not concluded at this point in time, and therefore I'm not prepared until such time as that is concluded in respect of the Moscow lab to say anything further.
When do you expect a decision?
When the process is properly concluded, and I'm not going to put a time frame on it.
Thank you.
Next question, please. Yes, Ben Rumsby.
Sir Craig Reedy is expected to be elected as your successor tomorrow. I know he doesn't start until January, but can you give us an idea of what advice that you might give him when he does begin his new role?
I'm more than happy to share on a confidential basis with Sir Craig many observations, but I'm certainly not going to give him advice through the media. And I'd say this, that he's an experienced operator. He's held many areas of responsibility and leadership, from the British Olympic Association to his role in the Olympic movement, currently one of the vice presidents. He has a wealth of knowledge and experience. I'm happy, as I say, to share with him, as I have been doing for some considerable time, what's in the best interests of WADA. I value his advice, and I think he values mine, but I'm not going to certainly give him that advice if there is any advice that I might be giving him through the media.
Any further questions from the floor? Yes, gentleman in the front row.
Sorry, I'm coming back to the laboratories issue, this time in connection with Rio de Janeiro. What has been the reaction from delegates here to the accreditation being revoked? What is, have people felt that the standards are too high? I understand the laboratories want to be more involved in the decision about revocation and so on.
Is it to you? Is that to you? I'm sorry, I missed that question. It was to you. Compliance with the code. Sorry, I thought it was addressed to David and didn't pick up all of the words that you had put in the question. You are asking for a comment on the standard of compliance that's proposed in the revised code. Look, what we will be doing in the revised code is recognising that, firstly, testing plans have got to be developed by every anti-doping organisation, by everyone that's involved in anti-doping. Those programs then may call, when developed, for certain variations. If I could suggest to you that the sport of chess, it is a signatory under the code. And I can't really imagine why some of the prohibited substances like human growth hormone might help you play chess. I can think of some other substances that might. So it might well be that, you know, in that particular sport or similar types of sport, that there is a need for a conversation and a discussion and an agreement with WADA to alter or vary the testing plan to exclude testing for certain things going forward. Now, that effectively is saying that one size doesn't necessarily fit all. You start with the principle that one size fits all, and then you start to look at just what is really practical for the particular signatory, the particular sport. That's going to take a bit of work. I've already had a number of discussions with the Director General on the resources that will be required there, but then that's part and parcel of being more effective. There's no point in certain sports doing certain things simply because it's in the code when it doesn't benefit catching cheats in their particular sport. That will be worked up. It will take obviously a fair bit of effort on our part. That effort will be made, but I think it's one of the good things, because that's been one of the criticisms in the past, that, you know, why do we have to do this? Certain sports will say. We've got a bit of room now to work that one through properly and come out with an effective plan in the end, of which they will then be judged on compliance, that final plan. But compliance clearly is a role that will never leave WADA, and we are a regulatory body, and therefore we will have to continue to ensure that there is a compliance program that is effective and comprehensive under the new code, which kicks off on January 1, 2015. Oh, the reaction to the Rio laboratory. Well, I haven't really had any reaction. I've seen, of course, and conscious of the joint release put out by WADA and FIFA indicating that there will be an effective program at the World Cup time, and arrangements have got to be made clearly for the analysis to be done outside of Rio. FIFA's aware of that. It's extra effort. They would prefer it wasn't the case, but they will adapt to it, and we're certainly satisfied that their program during the World Cup next year will be, again, a comprehensive and robust program, and that it won't suffer from want of analysis of the samples that are taken. They just simply won't be analysed in the same country.
Yes, Mark from Reuters.
While you brought up that four-letter word, so may I ask you your relationship these days with FIFA, which at one stage was not always that on an even keel. Could you characterise your relationship with FIFA perhaps over the last couple of years?
Look, I'd characterise it as very good. In fact, I don't think I've ever had a problem with FIFA. We had a disagreement in certain issues that were resolved fairly quickly by direct discussion, and we've had interaction there as much as we've had with any sport in my time as president, face-to-face interaction, and many projects that we've worked through together, and we've valued in many ways the capacity they have in the area of health and doping. We've always prepared to listen to what their thoughts are, and we've endeavoured to develop some joint programs together. I would describe it as productive and very friendly, and I'm very grateful for that. It's the biggest sport in the world, individual sport in the world, and therefore it's good to know that we work hand in hand and have common objectives, and that's been again reaffirmed by two of their senior medical people who are here at this conference this week.
Any final questions from the floor?
Well, look, I think I should have added one little bit at the end when we started off in respect of going ahead with cycling. I spoke about the question of sanctions and the revision in the code that might allow certain things to occur after tomorrow. I should have stressed that the inquiry that is going to proceed, and I believe it will very much proceed, that is the UCI inquiry, will be under the WADA Code. So it will be using the WADA Code. I have listened and read and heard all sorts of descriptions in the past about amnesty and truth and reconciliation. Can I just simply say to you, it will progress. I hope it will be effective. I believe it has the capacity to be effective. I know the commitment is there by UCI now to do it well and properly and soon, and it will be under the rules called the WADA Code. So I just wanted to stress that point. Other than that, thank you very much and look forward to seeing you again tomorrow.